that there are Eastern modalities that come into play with improving one's flexibility, improving one's joint health, as it were. Case in point, well, everyone knows about yoga, but
Sure.
in terms of that mind-body connection, how about the idea of meditation, or let's just say deep think, deep internal talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fond of saying that Eastern medicine has been around for a lot longer than Western medicine has even thought to exist. So while I don't claim to understand all the methods and I definitely think that the sweet spot is somewhere all in the middle, right? I think there's a lot to Eastern medicine in general, whole other topic, but on specifically to things like mindfulness or meditation, we now have overwhelming research that has a very real effect on our physiology. That when we engage in things like mindfulness, meditation, gratitude journaling, yoga, deep breathing, that our body has a metric called our heart rate variability that tells us basically of our nervous system balance, our autonomic nervous system balance, and it tells us, are we relatively well recovered from all the stresses that we're putting on our body. And we know through the research that those types of practices have an immediate effect on our heart rate variability in the positive direction, that it brings balance to our autonomic nervous system. And a balanced autonomic nervous system is extremely important when we talk about whether it's risk for injury, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's a host of other chronic diseases, and whether it's just being an overall well-adjusted, well-moving person. So it's pretty cool to now see what we probably intuitively know to work, that it's not just working because for some reason we can't explain, that there's actually physiological impacts that are happening in real time. And heart rate variability is just one of those many things, not to take into account the many brain chemicals and things like that get released when we engage in those types of things.
Wow. Well, here's another thing, just kind of moving into a slightly different area. How does diet play a role in our ability to flex and our ability to maintain as much youth in our movements as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another one we're just learning so much about it year after year. The types of foods that we eat has a powerful influence on almost every aspect of our health. So we've known for a long time chronic diseases, right? Heart disease, diabetes, cancers, those types of things. We now have really, really powerful evidence that it also has an influence on mental health, with fiber being, the more fiber we get, the decrease our risk for depression. We know that Western diets are associated with increased risk of depression. So that's well established in the research. And then finally, our musculoskeletal health. We now are seeing that diets that are more Western standard American diet, if you will, the SAD diet in nature, they're very fiber deficient. And that seems to track with certain types of musculoskeletal aches and pains and chronic pain conditions. So diets that are more, just generally a more clean, high fiber, low processed type diet. We see things like the research around knee arthritis, that people that have increased fiber intake have decreased incidence of knee osteoarthritis, improvements of inflammation at the level of their joint, and improved pain and function. We're seeing that with a host of other chronic kind of musculoskeletal mobility issues. Diabetes is probably the most clear example. We know that when people have blood sugar that's out of control, which in many cases in type 2 diabetes is nutrition's a large factor, that change influences the change of our body's tissues to be able to heal, because blood flow is now not able to get, especially to the areas of our body that are further away from our heart. And so mobility deficits associated with that are huge, and something that we even learn about in PT school, but we don't always put the connection together that those changes in a person's mobility that has diabetes, if we work our way back the chain, has a lot to do with how inflammatory their diet is and how it's impacting their blood sugar.
What was ironic recently was I came into work early one morning and we were talking during our shift change meeting, and a gentleman 10 years younger than me, okay, And, I am the OG. OG stands for old guy. So he's 10 years younger than me. And the funny thing about it is that he could not bend down and do a deep squat.
Mhm.
And I just went down. I demonstrated it. And I'm like, you're 10 years younger than me. You know, you know,
Yeah.
all those things amazingly are so tied together. And we in the West tend to think in terms of categories or almost like mechanics. All right, this is the brain and this is the heart, and these are the lungs, and this is what goes here and that goes there, and that there's no connection. However, we are essentially created to be as whole beings.
Mhm.
And that's
Totally.
so I would ask you this then, that being the case, is there one must-have food for optimum joint health?
I don't know if I can give a one must-have food, but I'll give one must-have kind of food element, I guess, and that's fiber. I think when we peel back all of the research, if we boil it down to what does the research support in the majority of it, it's high fiber diets and fiber coming from whole food sources, not supplement sources, because our body just doesn't absorb it the same. So lots of whole food, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, whole grains, different spices and things of that nature. So fiber would be my number one. Like, it's not one food. I also am a big fan of, there's some interesting research around anti-inflammatory spices. We know that it's dangerous to live on NSAIDs or a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug every day. It will tear up your GI system. So looking at alternatives like turmeric and black pepper combinations and ginger and garlic, all those things that have been used in society for a long time to have anti-inflammatory effects, and no, they're not going to have the same impact as popping an Advil. But when we make them a part of our diet routinely over time, I have seen, and the research would support that there is an impact.
Wow. That's so amazing, because one of the things that happens in India, we know about the Ayurvedic tradition. But what a lot of people don't realize is that, you hear the term West Indies. Well, that's because Columbus thought he was going to India. But eventually, a lot of the Indians came to the West Indies. Hence, you have, instead of chicken curry and goat curry in the West Indies, Jamaica, Trinidad, St. Kitts and Nevis, you have curried goat, curried chicken, curried fish. But that turmeric is so used there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll find individuals in their old age and they are walking further up hills and down hills, a lot more so than a lot of these young folk here who are on hoverboards.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
That's the thing. Now, I've heard that hip hinge exercises are something that's rather vital. So why are hip hinge exercises so important, particularly as we get older?
Sure. So the hip hinge, which is the movement pattern that's the foundation of like lifting something off the ground, or a deadlift if we're talking about a motion that's done in the gym. It's vital because we use it throughout our entire life, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's picking up a grandkid off the ground, or moving a couch, or lifting something up to move it at work. We use it throughout life. That's a extremely vital movement pattern. It's also one that, if we don't practice it on a regular basis, it's a little bit of a complex movement pattern for our brain and our body to coordinate together. So if we don't practice it on a regular basis, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? So it becomes a pattern that is unfamiliar to our body. And when it's unfamiliar and we're not efficient at it, is when we have an increased risk for injury when doing it. So hip hinge is one, and then the squat, right? Because what do we see often lost, especially in our kind of older adult population? We see the loss of the ability to get up and down off a chair and up and down off the commode. So practicing the squat movement pattern, maintaining its strength throughout life, That's another movement pattern that if you pick two to do on a regular basis and make sure that you maintain mobility and strength throughout your mobility in those two patterns, I think those are ones that are definitely worth it.
Perhaps at a later time, if you're up for it, I'll send up, I can set up a little short clip of hip hinge exercises that can be done sometime in the future. And that's up to you.
Sure.
I'd love to get our people to kind of see at least two of those demonstrated so that they have an idea of what to do. And
Sure.
I'm talking about folks who are even in the 60s, 70s, etc., because there are individuals there who I believe can actually benefit and improve from, on what they may have lost. Can someone
Sure.
compensate for loss of flexibility?
Oh, for sure. The human body is amazing in its ability to figure out how to get the job done. First of all, it's responsive to mobility training throughout life. Of course, as we go through body, a big thing that happens is we lose our hydration a little bit throughout our tissues. So it becomes, we have to put in more effort to get the same result, if you will. But you can improve mobility throughout life, throughout the lifespan. And then the other piece is that if, let's say, you're stuck in one place, maybe you had a surgery and you, for example, a spinal fusion, and that segment of your back is not going to move because it's designed not to. The body's amazing in its ability to make up for it elsewhere. We often use compensation as this like bad word of like, oh, I'm compensating, so I'm going to have an issue somewhere else. And that can be the case sometimes, but a lot of times it's a positive adaptation. The body will figure out how to get more out of other areas to make up for an area that's stuck. So it can definitely compensate in a positive way over time if you're consistent and you're progressive in your endeavors to improve your mobility, flexibility, strength, etc.
Wow, absolutely. I'm going to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about you because I don't think anyone could come in contact with you and be struck by both your beauty, brains, and business acumen. So we got to talk about you for a second. So you've started Proactivity and you've had that going for a bit. What are your next projects, and is there a book in the making?
Not a book yet. I wish I had time to write a book. No, essentially the way that, I guess, a little bit of backstory. So Proactivity itself has been around for 20 years. And when I was in PT school, I almost gave up because I didn't feel like I fit in a traditional medical model. I did well in school. I just couldn't see myself being behind closed doors in an office, waiting for people to get broken down and then coming to see me. And so I almost gave up. I found, fortunately, through the amazing power of the universe to put us where we need to be, I found Proactivity. They actually helped my dad come back from a pretty bad experience health-wise. And I knew that was what I wanted to do. So as soon as I graduated, I moved to New Jersey. I learned the Proactivity way, came down here and started Proactivity North Carolina. And so that's been now 2.5 years. And what's next, I'd say, is just continuing to build on the momentum thus far. We've had, it's been truly amazing, the growth that we've experienced and just the ability to get our message out and be met with not resistance, but open arms to this concept that's a little different, that we can get ahead of these things, prevent them outright, and find ways to put ourselves where the people are rather than waiting for people to come to us. Go where they spend their time, which is why I love being in the workplace environment so much. So yeah, no books planned yet, maybe someday. But for right now, if I get a couple minutes to sit down, I'm just trying to read a book, not write one.
That's understandable. Our time these days are short. I'm just so happy that you took the time to spend here with me and many of my people that love to watch this program. And perhaps in the future, again, we'll see where things are. If you need a ghostwriter, I'm always available.
There we go. There we go.
But listen. Thank you again for this time, and we just wish you the greatest success and can keep helping us old folks stay flexible And I don't think I'm that old, but I call myself the old guy. Like I always tell everybody, don't just climb your mountain, crush through it. This is the Hankster OG here with Dr. Ali Hartman. And let's see you next time.
Yeah. That was awesome.